Thank you for joining us today. We're going to give people just a minute to join us. All right, well, let's get going here. And when other people join, we'll just fold them into the event. So thank you for joining us today. Get our nice screen sharing and get our slideshow going. Wanted to welcome you to tonight's United Policyholders Roadmap to Recovery workshop. This is our California 2020 Wildfire Series, workshop number 6. We're talking about buy, rebuild, or cash out. And going to discuss the options and decision points for replacing your dwelling. And so just a little bit about United Policyholders. We're a nonprofit organization. We've been in existence since the 1991 Oakland Hills fire, so 30 years old. As I mentioned, we're a not-for-profit, not for sale. We're funded strictly by donations and grants. We don't take money from insurance companies, and we represent insurance consumers in all 50 states. About our team up. So we have a small professional staff, largely based in the Bay Area. We partner with government and nonprofit agencies to do our work. And then we have a fabulous cadre of volunteers, our fired up survivors, our team up professional volunteers who help with so many different things. And that's how we're able to bring you the services that we provide. We have 3 programs: our Roadmap to Recovery, which is today's workshop. It provides guidance on insurance, restoring assets, and getting back home after a catastrophic loss. Our Roadmap to Preparedness is where we take those lessons learned to help people reduce risk and be better prepared as far as insurance and documenting their assets. And then our Advocacy and Action program, which is where we identify those pain points and then work with to enforce and enhance insurance consumers' rights and protections in all 50 states. For those of you new to us, this is the library we have for your disaster. It's our California 2021 Wildfire Help Library. It's got very specific resources to California. There's an opportunity to sign up for our event and email notifications. We have a professional help directory there, sample letters, claim forms, examples of reports and other documents, a series called Survivor Speaks with different tips. And then it also lists the events that we have upcoming as well. So please check this out, bookmark this page, follow up, information changes, and we want you to take advantage of that. So how to speak up is one of our euphemisms for the work we do. We want you to be as strong as possible, keep your paperwork organized, be empowered, be assertive, but also be polite, keeping that claim diary, be educated on your insurance rights, network with others, getting professional help when needed, and being proactive and unwilling to be shortchanged. I'm sorry I flipped it to the up backwards, but that is the mantra that we're looking for. A few more things to talk about. Effective communication, just being aware, as always, that this insurance claim is a business negotiation. It's a legal contract you have with your insurance agency. And so you want to be very careful and document your loss as thoroughly as possible, and treat this as a business transaction, because the more reasonable your asks that fit in with that business negotiation, the better your settlement. You want to always confirm all communications in writing, creating that paper trail that's going to help make sure those promises are kept. So anytime you speak to anyone related to your insurance claim, documenting in your claims journal who you spoke to, the date you spoke to them, what commitments were made, what they asked you to do, what they committed to do for you, so that you have that paper trail to go back to. And if you need help, you're able to get that. And just being aware, part of the communication is that knowing where to make your asks. Adjusters have varying levels of financial release authority. They have a chain of command. And so if you're finding that your adjuster is not able to help you, do go up that chain of command. You ask to speak to their supervisor, go on up the chain to see what it takes to get you what you're, a response that helps acknowledge what you're working on and what you need help with. Let's see, sorry, my mouse is deciding to not work here. So the fine print, this workshop is intended to be general guidance only, not legal advice. Annie and Neelam are volunteers with our team up. I am not an attorney. None of us play an attorney on TV or in real life. So please don't take anything we say as a legal advice here. We don't endorse or warn any of our sponsors on our site, speakers at our workshop, and just be aware that our speakers are volunteering their time as educators. Today's presenter, myself, my name is Valerie Brown. I'm Senior Program Officer with United Policyholders. We have Annie Barber from the 2017 Tubbs Fire in Santa Rosa, and Neelam. And Neelam, I'm gonna let you pronounce your last name because I know I'm gonna butcher it. Oh, you're muted.
Solomon.
Oh, thank you. With the 2017 Redwood Fire in Redwood Valley, California. This is a little bit about me. I'm going to skip this and we're going to go straight to have Neelam and Annie introduce themselves. So Neelam, if you'll just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'm Neelam Solomon. I lived in Redwood Valley. I had lived in Redwood Valley 47 years in the same house that my father-in-law built and that my husband then built, added to, and lost it in the fire. The insurance was very sweet. The first day gave me this check and took my picture, and they were really nice. But what they were doing is they were not telling us everything that they were supposed to tell us. So it was a long story, and 4 years later, I'm settled, that's behind me. And I just wish all the best to all of you.
Thank you. And Neelam she had bought a house elsewhere. So it's tying back into our topic. And then Annie had rebuilt a different house on the same location. Annie, I'll let you.
Yes, my name's Annie Barber. I'm a 2017 Tubbs Fire survivor from Santa Rosa. I chose to rebuild my house, same lot, but just a little different, more upgraded house. I used a bigger builder with a master floor plan. I've been talking too much today already.
Thank you both. And this actually, I wanted them to introduce themselves at this point in the presentation, because the goal of today's presentation is to help you explore options for replacing your dwelling. And these are the 4 options that we acknowledge that you have. And, so you can rebuild the house as was. Most people don't do that. I will say I had a gentleman in my fire in 2007 who rebuilt the exact same house. He did the building code upgrades, but he even rebuilt where the drawer in the kitchen would not open because of the dishwasher all the way. His wife was so excited because she's like, well, at least I get a new kitchen out of this. And no, he wanted to rebuild the same house they had with all the same flaws. Most people don't do that. So it's kind of like a pain and suffering toll. It's like, well, at least I get to do this, make it a little different, right? Annie, who rebuilt the different house, Neelam, who bought elsewhere, and you do have the ability to rebuild elsewhere. And obviously, if you decide you're not going to rebuild, that is another option to cash out. That involves tax ramifications. We'll touch on that very briefly, and then we'll have a workshop on that, hopefully in February next month. So let's keep going. Rules of the roadmap reminder. So just to be aware, California has more regulations and laws to protect you in the post-disaster insurance claim process than any other state. Oregon is very close. They did an incredible job after the 2020 fires there, adopted a whole lot of things, but California really has done an excellent job of protecting you as a consumer as far as having those regulations and laws. Now, as Neelam said, it doesn't mean those regulations and laws are necessarily acknowledged or voiced during the claims process. So you being aware of what your rights are in the state are key to getting you a successful claim. As the second point here, the adjuster assigned to your claim is supposed to know them all. They probably don't. And that's just the reality. When there's a disaster, insurers pull in claims adjusters from all across the country. They might have read the rules of the state, but they're talking to so many people, they're not going to necessarily remember. It's just Annie is in Colorado now for the Boulder fire. I was just out there last week. And when I'm really tired and I've talked to people for 10 straight hours, I would say California instead of Colorado and catch myself. You know, it's just that default answer is not necessarily the best answer when you're tired and you've been talking for hours.
And I think what we're finding even now is that the adjusters may even be newer than usual due to lack of employees and COVID.
Oh, that, yeah, then that, and the reality that you may have changed adjusters several times. So being aware of that. And again, it goes back to that documenting what you've, the conversations you've had and the commitments they've made, so you're not starting from scratch. You know, and you know, you have to understand the benefits that are outlined in your policy. You have to have an accurate valuation of your losses. And the resources we provide, the goal is to increase your chances of recovering all those available insurance funds, okay? So this is just a recap really quickly of the laws in California, the regulations that protect your rights. So you have the ability to choose who will repair your property. I'm not going to cover all of these in detail. This slide deck will be available to you and this webinar as well, so you're able to read those. So don't feel like you need to jot these down. We'll have a PDF of this on the site, you know, that you'll be able to access. But just being aware of this, they cannot require you to have your property repaired by a specific individual or entity. And here's the code that protects your rights here. You have a right to full payment of your policy benefits, and these are the conditions for that. One thing to bear in mind for all of you, you have at least 24 months plus 12-month extension for a total of 36 months for additional living expenses. This does, if you have a stated dollar amount limit on your policy, this does not increase that. You know, and the little reminder here, tiny house, fifth wheel, those are just ideas that we'll talk about just very briefly here about being creative with your ALE. And you do have that right to replace by buying and not rebuilding. Just real short refresher on this, you know, you've got replacement cost versus actual cash value. This is where it feels like when you opened your claim and your insurance adjuster started talking, or you came to your first United Policyholders webinar, it sounds like we're talking Greek because we throw around all these acronyms, nobody defines them. And you know, and they make a huge difference to understanding what's going on with your policy. So one of the reasons we keep touching on these is just to keep them fresh in your mind. So the cost to put your home back together with new building materials, the replacement cost. You have your actual cash value, which is the value of your home an instant before the loss. You know, that's your actual cash value. And then that depreciation is the deduction in value due to wear and tear. And so those two pieces together are the replacement costs. And you're going to find this in contents as well as your dwelling. But just again, just making sure that you keep this in mind. Benefit payouts formula, again, replacement costs, RC, actual cash value, ACV. And so here's the California code on this. If the policy requires you to be insured to repair, rebuild, or replace, they will pay you the actual cash value until the damaged property is repaired, rebuilt, or replaced. You know, and then they'll pay the difference between that. So going back to that slide, they owe you this here, the actual cash value, until you rebuild, replace, or repair, and then they owe you this difference. So for a lot of you, you would have gotten a check from your insurer for your dwelling, for your coverage A, that would have, you know, it was a percentage of, and that's where they're paying you that ACV. And then once you start rebuilding or you replace the home, then they're going to start paying you on the difference there, that depreciated amount. This is your right to information. You know, you want to know how they calculated that depreciation, and your settlement offer, you have that explicit right now, which is lovely. Combining coverages, this is very new, and this is, I mean, for me, this is very exciting. It means you can use your replacement cost amounts for other structures to help rebuild the structure versus having to incur those. And so this was a win that passed with the legislature, and to just again, you don't need to write this down. You'll be able to get this PDF. with this information, but this was something that I know from Annie and Neelam's fire, they've been fighting on this battle all of that time, and we now have it in California law. Resolving disputes over replacement costs. Here's the information from the code that they have to follow. And this is worth noting because it calls out what they need to do and how to resolve the disputes, right? And makes it very clear. Dwelling replacement cost options. Again, California code here, you have the ability to rebuild the home at the current location as it was, rebuild a different home at the current location. Like Annie said, she rebuilt, not quite as was, it was an updated and refined version. She could have rebuilt it in a new location, or as Neelam did, purchase an already built home at a new location. And you see in the chat, we have a publication that can walk you through this in some detail. I know this is a lot of information we're throwing out, so just bear in mind this is more of a high-level presentation to get you where you're trying to go, and get you the information you need. And then obviously there's much more resources on our website. And so going back to the options, the option to rebuild the house as was, rebuild that different house, buy elsewhere, rebuild elsewhere. And so when we're talking about replacing a home by buying, not rebuilding, here's a California code that protects that right. In my fire in 2007, we understood after the 2003 Cedar fire that people could buy a replacement home. It wasn't an issue. A few people did it. It wasn't very common. With California having multiple, what we used to call 100-year fires that keep occurring, it seemed to be something insurers had kind of put the brakes on and put some obstacles in the way. With Neelam and Annie's fire, they, with the work that they did to buy replacement homes and to move that along there, it was enshrined again. And then this is the latest venture by the legislature to protect this right, to give you this right. And this is like the most substantive part of this in my mind, and Neelam, I'm sure you'll talk about this when we get to that, is there is no land value deduction for California residents who lost their homes as of this law taking effect in 2021. And this has been a huge battle for people in 2017, 18, and 19, and 20. But for losses that were incurred in 2021 when this took effect, it's a huge deal. Right, and let's see, Survivor Wisdom, just want to break here for a second. One of our volunteers from the 2003 fire, Cedar fire, Ken Klein, wanted to share this with you. And this goes back to, this is a business transaction, right? So the loss of your home is a deeply emotional loss. Emotion is the enemy of a good business deal. So when you're dealing with, all of these businesses as part of your home replacement, the more you resist emotional decisions, the better it will turn out. And do not let businesses profit off your emotions. And that's the wisdom he wanted us to share with you today. So, do keep that in mind. And Annie and Neelam, I don't know if you have anything you'd like to share that aligns with that, but I wanted to give you that opportunity because I know it's such an emotional, and there's so many decisions to make.
There is, and in your mind, you really need to separate that out. And it's not easy, especially when things aren't going your way. So you need to have, I needed to have somebody I could vent to before I made these phone calls to deal with them. And then I could get my composure together, because this is like, for me, and my neighbors, I think we all felt like this was similar to a death. You had to go through the entire grieving process. So separating that out is a huge deal.
Neelam, anything to share?
That's what Annie says is very, very true. And I remember telling people, don't let the insurance company get the better of you. Don't let them wear you down. And do you know what? They wore me down. I settled, and I was able to sleep after I settled. I left money on the table, but I was able to sleep. I realized they are the pros at this. And, we're not, we're the novices. So, but you want to make sure that you get a fair deal, and you must have information. If you don't have information, you can't negotiate well. If you
Exactly.
know what you are owed, and if you need to, go and talk to a lawyer, go and talk to somebody who knows, just to gather up all the information. And UP is wonderful. So, they had workshops, they had lawyers looking at contracts. And so, yeah, get all the information you can.
Oh, thank you for bringing that up. And that's actually why UP exists, right? We're here to help level that playing field, because as Neelam said, they've hired professionals to work their side of that business agreement. And you're an individual trying to handle this yourself. And so we leverage that by providing you these educational opportunities, information, resources on our website, materials, the yellow book, and also, clinics, like we're doing the, we'll be doing clinics. We just did the legal clinic in December. And so opportunities like that, where you can talk to a professional without having to pay to figure out what might be your next steps. And so, getting back on this, we're focused today on that decision process. Are you going to buy or rebuild? We're going to, talk about some of the decisions to make, and then, Annie and Neelam will share how it went for them with the option they picked, and then we'll talk about some of the challenges as well, including some of the financial challenges for this, because it's not as simple. I want to buy or rebuild. Sometimes the finances are what drive your decision, right? Let's be very honest here. And so the decision process, okay, you're looking at affordability, what it costs to do it where you are, to go somewhere else. Where will those additional funds come from? What other decisions are you facing? Some people, in my fire, people took that opportunity to downsize. The kids were home, they didn't need that big house, and it was just easier to build elsewhere and build a smaller house, or upgrade because there was another compelling reason, right? And then identifying where you're going to go for that additional help. And remember, when we're thinking about rebuilding, some people become renters because they're going to cash out, and they're going to move into some other situation. So remember, not all the decisions are going to be financial. And what feeds into this is knowing what your insurance proceeds are. What money do you have on the table? What it would cost to rebuild? What would you be owed to replace it, right? Is there enough money? And then looking at those tax ramifications. Affordability is, key here, right? Downsizing, upsizing. What do you want to do? Is this an opportunity to move closer to where your family, your kids are? We have a survivor who did this workshop with us, I guess, a year ago, and they moved to Utah, and thinking, oh, there's no fires here, I don't want to be in California anymore. And when they did the webinar with us a year ago, they were like, well, I think we're going to move back to California because we miss it, but Utah and the West are all having fires, so it didn't quite work out the way they wanted it. And then
so if I can interject here, we also have ones who took their out-of-pocket living expenses or loss of use, and they moved somewhere for about 9 months, and they realized that wasn't a good fit. So they came back to where they originated, and they bought a house there. So it's almost like they got a trial run in a new environment to see if they liked it.
Yeah.
Great idea.
Or seeing, there's some people who try condo life, or they moved into independent living just to be, well, you know what, I have too many things going on. I don't want to cook and shop and all of the stuff. I'm going to make life easier. And then they're like, no, I'm rebuilding my house, or I'm buying another house. Yeah. But there's that opportunity to figure out what options are, especially if you can stretch your dollars with that. And then one of the others is those building code upgrades. What impacts will that have on your decision? So we're looking at, especially with the Sierras, we're looking at septic considerations. You've got a lot of older homes that weren't permitted before. And so getting those clearances, those permits, to meet current building codes are complicated and they're stressful and they add money to the cost. And so, that's part of it as well as, is it more affordable to buy versus rebuilding and incurring this cost, especially, we were talking about COVID limiting workers. That impacted sawmills. We saw the cost of lumber jack up so tremendously in 20 and 21. So, all of those things feed into the cycle, these decisions. If you're looking at, the finances here, going back to that affordability, being aware, where are those additional funds going to come from? Do you have savings set aside? Are you going to use your personal property, your contents money? Are you going to borrow from your retirement? Some people look at building a granny unit or an ADU on their property, and that's going to be a rental source that they're going to use. Other people build that first, save their dollars, and then as they've made money, then they add to that mix. They're going to rebuild their house later, and now they have dollars to do that. There's the SBA loans. There's other resources out there, but knowing what it is that you're going to do, because the finances do matter so much. And then looking at the overall picture, right? The decisions you're now facing. What decisions you make here on rebuilding or replacing this home, how they're going to affect the rest of your financial future. If you're looking at college or retirement or, medical issues or long-term care, do you want to jeopardize other funds you have to rebuild that home? And so all of this weighs into this decision, right? And so thinking about, should you rebuild, where are you in life? If you have children, what their ages are, family, who lives with you, who do you support? Are you rebuilding to stay in that area permanently, or were you already planning to leave the area in retirement? If your neighbor doesn't come back, would you stay? And those things are real. It's the beautiful thing about where so many of us are in California, is that our neighbors are such a big part of our lives. Whether you're in an urban center or you're in a more rural setting, those neighbors, if they're not there for a lot of people, it's not the same, and that's what they're looking for. So knowing how committed you are to remaining in your same neighborhood, right? And then let's go back to just the general questions, right, that fit with the United Policyholders world. Were you properly insured? What if you're underinsured? How much do you owe if you have a mortgage against your house? Can you buy elsewhere? What about where you work? Will that commute impact your current lifestyle? How far away would you move? Can you refinance? Can you buy can you get a construction loan? And that last question, cashing out, should you consider accepting the insurance and now becoming a renter or joining a community that's going to provide you the life that you want? All of these fit. And now I'm going to turn it over to Annie and Neelam just to talk about how you made that decision, when you made it in the process, and anything you want to share that from a hindsight standpoint.
This is Annie. I made a really knee-jerk decision right after the fire. My first instinct was, I'm going to get my house back. And I have a tendency to be pretty stubborn. I felt that the fire took my house. I didn't give it to them. I hadn't offered it to them, and I was going to get it back. So that's kind of where my emotional part came from. I had lived there for 30 years, raised my son there, had a husband there who passed away. All of those factors helped make my decision. Could that decision have changed? Absolutely. If I had found that I was woefully underinsured and that I would have incurred a bunch of debt, that kind of stuff would have swayed me. But in the big picture, I was okay. I didn't need a custom home, in my opinion. And I was happy to go with a bigger builder to have economy of scale. And I truly love my neighbors. So those were the big part of it, the big picture. The secondary picture, and I can say this because if my son had been younger, he would have been a focal point in this decision making, but he was raised. He also wanted the house rebuilt. So it was a factor, but it wasn't my number one, knowing that he was raised and he was going to make his own decisions in life.
my initial, a lot of what Annie said is where I was coming from to start with. When I heard about the fire, I had just left home the day before, and I was at my son's home in Indiana, and these calls came at 4 in the morning or whatever it was, and I called back, found out there was a fire, and did not, just knew it was in Ukiah, in Redwood Valley. Next morning, that morning I'm awake. So I called some friends and they said, no, your side is safe. Then someone said, no, then we're listening to the news, don't know what's happening. 7:30 in the morning, California time, I called a contractor I knew and I hired him. I said, I don't know if my house is burnt, but if it is, I'd like you to build me a house. And he didn't know there was even a fire. I woke him up. And from there, my insurance, which started real sweet, turned out to be not so sweet. I was the first one the adjuster came to. The second week of the fire, he came to my house, and then they took forever. And they would make these spreadsheets, and then they would put wrong information about the specs of the house, and then go back and back and back. Well, this builder was ready to build, and there was no settlement. There was nothing. So he started building for my neighbor. And I knew it would be another year before I could get him. This was May. So now we are in 2018 May. Insurance still fiddling around. Finally, they come up with the numbers and tell me, yes, you were underinsured, which I knew on day one. I'm still going to build. But when we saw what I was getting, it was way below what I needed to rebuild because I did have a very custom home. And so then, you think about, do I do this? Do I wait another year and a half before I move in, which would take me to the end of 2019? Or do I look for something? There was not much to look for. There was nothing to look for. And luckily, I found this house. And 6 months after that, I went to every open house to make sure I'd made the right decision. And I had. I just had to convince myself I'd done the right thing. It was hard not building where I was because, like Annie said, my children were born there. My father-in-law had built that house. My husband, increased it, added on to it. All the memories were there. Everything, my life was there. And I was trying to recreate the life, and I realized I couldn't recreate it. So anyway, you just move on. And I did not want to take a loan at this stage in my life. And if I wanted to build what I had, even smaller, but the quality I had, I would have had to take a lot of money as loan, a lot of loans. So anyway, I'm happy with my decision. But each one does what's right for them. And we move on, and life goes on. And I'm thankful I am where I am. I'm healthy. I've got everything. I've got my friends. They were amazing through the whole thing. I had friends, about 15 people who offered to let me stay with them. So, and I hope, and I'm sure most of you have that, and you're going through what Annie and I went through, making the right decision. But just collect all the information and listen to yourself. Listen to inside of you. That'll help you make your decision.
Thank you both for sharing that, because I think that's something I know for most of my friends as they rebuilt or bought a home. What they said is it's a house, it's not a home. I make it a home out of new memories, and so I know a lot of people focus on, I've got to get to that finish line, I need to get home. And then when they get in the home, it's not a home. It's not their home, right? You know, except for the
Yeah.
gentleman who could literally walk through the house in the dark and the door wouldn't open, that was his rationale for including all the inconveniences. But for most people, it's not home, it's their house.
It's a house because the things inside made it the home.
Yeah.
The little things you had. I have to tell you guys a story. I was leaving, like I said, I wasn't home when the fire happened. I was leaving, I'd gone to my son's house. I was going to watch my granddaughter while they went to a wedding in Italy. And then I was going on to India. Okay, that didn't happen. I came back. They didn't go to Italy. He accompanied me. So anyway, but, oh gosh, what was I saying? I forgot. This is my brain with the white hair.
That's not a home. It's a house. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So what I did, I tried to be organized. I'm not very organized, tried to be organized. So I had my cleaning lady, we went to the storage, brought all the Christmas stuff, put it in the middle of the living room. And I said, when I come back, I'll have all the stuff to put out, I'm efficient. So when the kids come, everything will be done. Well, I had things from all over the world in my Christmas collection. And guess what happened? It was all gone. So anyway, that's life. All the little ornaments that they had made or someone had given or some trip. Anyway, all gone. The other day, I go to my storage. I bought new things and built up new things. And I was bringing them home. And this guy's helping me. And I said, what's this old box? Open it. We had left one box in the storage.
Oh,
And
no.
there were the old ornaments. A lot of them were gone because I had several boxes of ornaments. These were some oldest ornaments and so sentimental, and it felt so good. That is home.
That is
That
wonderful.
is the memories,
That is wonderful. Those are the kind of things that I miss. So I completely understand how heartwarming that must have felt. So I'll add on to this a little bit. It's very true that when you get your house back, it isn't a home. And especially when you kind of upgrade or you do a master floor plan, you don't replace exactly what you had. It does take a little bit of time to retrain your brain and a little bit of your heart that this is where you live now. And yeah, you can walk out the door and you can see your neighbors, but generally your neighbors' houses look different also. But it's all a process. And I think my hardest process once I walked into my home was, what do I do now? I've now spent this time focused on getting my home back. And you spend so much time and effort and emotion on that there's a little bit of, heck, where do I go from here?
A little let down. I know the first time I was in the country, didn't need shades on my bedroom. I had trees, almost coming into the house, apple trees and stuff like that. Anyway, the first morning I woke up in town, I bought my house in town, Ukiah, and I opened my eyes and I can see the neighbor's dish, satellite dish. And I thought, heck, what the heck have I come to? He has since taken the dish down, so it's not so bad.
Thank you both for sharing that.
And
And
Valerie, did you want to go to lender options or do we have other slides on that?
Just talking about what those options were. So, I mean, one of the things that we wanted to just hit on here is, Neelam shared she wasn't willing to go into debt and take loans to replace as was. And so knowing your personal financial situation, and then, we've mentioned earlier, SBA is an option if you'd applied for it. And Annie, if you want to speak to any of the other lending tools that you know that your friends and neighbors had used, go ahead and share those, please. Yeah.
So the one grave mistake I made that I had no idea was a mistake until I started listening more to United policyholders was I immediately paid off my loan. because I didn't owe that much on it. And I was in the grocery industry for 33 years and was kind of working on the side, doing different things, trying to figure out where I was going to land. And so I did not have a W-2 per se that would have qualified me for another loan had my build been more than what I was anticipating. So I really have to stress to people to make sure that you don't close out that loan until you know that mortgage, until you know that you're not going to need it. And in my neighborhood, a big deal was putting money into an escrow account, which is what my big builder had me do. I did not know the value of that at that time either. But what that did was it allowed the mortgage company to navigate the funding of my house. And they would only give the builder drops of money when a certain milestone was met, which meant that the builder could not get more than what he was at. So when my house was 50% built, he had 50% of the money. And when my house was 100% built, he had 100% of the money. I never could get underwater that way. And that, in hindsight, was a lot of security for me.
Well, and thank you for bringing that up, Annie, because that's one of the, if you have an existing mortgage, obviously you should still be paying your mortgage payment. Your additional living expenses is covering, where you're currently residing. Before you look at paying off that loan with your dwelling checks, because it's confusing for people because they come in and they've got both your mortgage company's name on it and your name. And sometimes lenders are just like, well, we're just going to close out your loan and we'll give you the balance due. And like Annie said, you don't want to do that, because if you've got a mortgage with a low interest rate, you want to keep that and use all your insurance proceeds to rebuild. Fannie Mae has a fabulous program called Know Your Options. It's on our website for your disaster. It's called Don't Pay Without a Plan. And so that's the name of the publication on there, but do check that out before you make it. They offer, I believe it's 18 months of financial counseling for free to help you go through your options. There's forbearance, there's multiple tools that they have that many lenders can take advantage of. So before you run down a hole and limit your options, check that out. One of the other options, of course, is that construction loan, but they're a lot more complicated to qualify for, and so you just want to keep as many options open as you can there. And then speaking of finances, disaster. Hold on, this is one of those animation things that I'm not really good at. Hopefully it loads in here. So, for disaster income tax reporting, most everybody thinks they have a loss. Bear in mind that the loss, if you're looking at under insurance, that's not what the IRS means by what a loss is. It's not under insurance. It's actually the gain on the property minus that loss, and so it's complicated. Talk to your CPA about those tax implications if you are buying, rebuilding, or cashing out. And I'm trying to figure out how to make this go to the next thing. There it goes. And that's the form that gets filled out for your taxes. We will do a webinar on that for you folks. It should be in February. It might be the beginning of March. We don't have a date set yet, but we will have two of the nation's disaster, casualty, tax losses, those experts on a panel for you so you can get those questions answered. Just going back to buying versus rebuilding, the process is almost identical, because it really is what do, how much it's going to cost to rebuild the house you lost up to policy limits. And then, and that determines what your insurance company owes you up to policy limits, right? If you already paid the full policy limits and all your extended and your building code, things that convey with that, being able to group your coverages, then you probably don't need an estimate. But if you're not there yet, you might have to have that estimate to prove what you had. We're going to talk really briefly, just touching on your coverages, determining your coverage A. Here's the California statute for this. And I'm gonna, what does this mean? So the amount you're owed is based upon the cost to rebuild the home you lost, plus code upgrades up to your policy limit, as I mentioned earlier. If you're under policy limits, then you probably need that estimate, even if you don't intend to rebuild. And so what you're going for is trying to agree upon what that scope of loss is. You know, it's for the house that you had, not the new. If you're building one, it's not the new one you're building. It's to replace as was what I had before. And you know, this is the guidance for this. Going back to the code, this is the code to know. California Insurance Code 2051.5. And then here's a section of that that talks about the replacement costs. And jump on some challenges for this, you know, differences between the insurance company's estimate, your contractor's estimate to replace, making sure it's like, kind, and quality, as Neelam said. A lot of times she provided information, what she got back didn't match what she said, so she had to correct the information she had already given them when they gave it back to her. Typically, there's gaps sometimes in the listing of soft costs and supervision. If you don't have code upgrade coverage, that's problematic, because you will, if you're building, you're going to have to meet energy standards and those building code upgrades that are required, and that will come out of your building costs if you don't have coverage. You take a deep breath right now, and then give you a second, and then we're going to let Annie talk about just what that rebuilding process looked like. And you can see in the chat some handouts here. There, Carolyn, thank you for getting that information out there. All right, Annie, turning over to you, talking about the rebuilding process. A full disclosure here, and my apologies for the barking dogs. This first lot is someone from the Thomas fire the same year as Annie, but obviously in the Ventura area, who started rebuilding about 18 months after their fire. You know, we're just, while Annie's talking, we'll run through these, and then the next set of slides will be her home.
Okay. So for me, one of the things that we did in our neighborhood, in the Tubbs fire, we had lost 1,440 homes in our neighborhood. So we formed a group to kind of help navigate the process. And one of my jobs in that group was to interview and vet the big builders and do a matrix for our neighborhood as to what they offered. And in that process, I was able to kind of figure out which one made the most sense for me. So I was fairly early in the game, per se. I went with a big builder with the knowledge that my house would be done quicker, that I would have economy of scale, and that the data shows that as you're building your home, the bigger the builder you use, the more apt you are to have a quality build. A builder who has the experience is a very valued builder. So knowing that, I went into contract, and my build started 6 months after the fire. And my builder had planned on doing 20 foundations the first month. Then they would do 20 more foundations. Here's my cleared lot as they're starting to do some of the grading and groundwork, and 20 framing in the next month. So I actually just got to watch each step month to month to month. I was probably over at my house 5 out of the 7 days a week watching it come back. The downside of this was I gave my neighbors a lot of anxiety because they were watching my house be built and they weren't in the process yet. And I can tell you that coming around that corner, first they'd get excited and then they'd have a panic attack that they weren't where I was. I was where I was not because I rushed the process, which I think would have been really detrimental to me, but because I had done my research. So here's the framing of my house. As we've talked about, I did not have the same house that I had originally. That is part of the economy of scale of using a bigger builder. I had one that didn't have compartmentized rooms. I have an open floor plan and a craftsman style house. This is the point where it started to get really exciting because I could actually see what my house would look like instead of just a picture. And I had a front porch, which I had never had. My builder did all the front yard landscaping. It was a turnkey house. He did all the appliances, the heating, the air, everything was included in my build, and I could do some upgrades, which I did some of those. But all in all, I was really happy with the end result and with my decision.
And Annie, we can see the point you made here. Here's the vacant lot next door, and you're in an HOA. So, there were
No HOA.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, not HOA. You were in a
Yeah.
suburban area, yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And so at this point, I didn't have any houses. I think there was one other house built on the street, occupied. And then there was some standing homes down at the very far end of the street, but it was a little eerie for a while.
Yeah. And I'm going to take us back to the O'Rhodes house from the Thomas fire. They were 18 months later starting because they had to figure out, can we afford it? How we're going to do it? What do we want? They took their time. And they were finished in about 18 months so this is when they cleared their lot. This is 10 months into their rebuild. I know we've gone through these before. 18 months later, this is when I went to the house to see, they were technically not supposed to be living on site. They had an air mattress inside because they were so excited to be in there. But it wasn't done, right? So 18 months later, not done. What was interesting with them, this is their dining room table inside is their patio furniture for outside because patio is not done, and they didn't have the money to buy that because they put contents into this. And so what was interesting with this is that while they took their time on building for their neighborhood, they were in, I think, Colina Vista in Ventura, they ended up getting in about the time most of their neighbors did. Because, like Neelam said, there were people who literally called a contractor as soon as they determined that their house was gone. And then they fired that contractor 3 months later because it wasn't a good fit, because they were just trying to find someone while there was somebody there, but it wasn't somebody who was actually going to be able to build the house the way they wanted it. So being aware of that, it's, I should have put it in the deck. Sorry about that. We usually have this, this image of, recovery is a marathon and not a sprint. And that is absolutely true. And then I'm going to pop us over to Neelam to talk about buying. And so this is not Neelam's house. This is one of our folks from the Woolsey fire who was significantly underinsured and ended up buying a replacement home. He was also older. He just did not feel like he didn't feel he could go through the construction process, nor did he have the funds to rebuild what he had. So, and so he, and it was devastating for him because he had, he was in the Malibu Hills, he had this great view, and he can't live there anymore. So, and Neelam, I'll let you, let's talk about why you decided to buy a home instead of rebuilding. So how did you start this process?
It was because, after I settled, I went to India, the trip I hadn't taken the year before I took now. And I was there and talking about rebuilding, knowing that I had to wait for my builder because he was working on another house. And I was talking to my sister and she said, why don't you just buy a house? She said, Neelam, you don't need all that aggravation at this point in your life, just buy a house. And I'm like, no, this is my home. This is where I've always been. This is where I came. This land was in the family for a long time. And then I started thinking about it and said, she's probably right. But then I was looking at the papers and there was nothing for sale. So I'm in India looking at the paper every day. What's for sale? There was nothing for sale. A couple of houses came up, but I wanted to see them. I didn't want to have someone else make the decision for me. So I came back, there were 2, 3 houses that hadn't sold in really good neighborhoods. So I arrived, called the realtor and said, let's see these houses. So, and I know the realtor is a good friend. So he went around and no, Gary, what would we do here? All we can do is, gut the whole thing and start again, but where's the builder to start again? I might as well build a new house. So anyway, then he said, Neelam, I've got this house and let me take you. And I said, no, I want to be in this area. He said, let's go and see this. And I walked in and I said, this is it. Because I had watched the market and there was nothing out there. I said, do it. He said, someone is coming back to look at it. I said, you put my offer now. And I want an answer tomorrow morning. And I got it. So, and I'm not sorry I made this decision. At first, like I said, for 6 months, I went and saw every house on the market to make sure I made the right decision, and I had. I'm glad it did. It would have taken a lot of emotional toil on me, a lot of physical toil, and then I was able to get settled instead of waiting till, the beginning of 2020, which is when I would have gotten. So I'm glad I made the decision. I'm not unhappy with it. And especially at the stage in my life, I don't have young children. If I did, I would have definitely rebuilt. If my children were younger, if they were home, I would have definitely rebuilt.
Well, thank you for sharing that. This is a publication, one of our, another 2017 fire survivor put together. The gentleman who put this together is a little analytical, and so he put together this forced choice matrix for decision making. And it's on our website. Here's the location, and it walks you through, when you're talking about why buying, figuring out what you want in that home. And it's the same thing you're going to do if you're rebuilding, but as Neelam said, knowing what you want in a house helps you determine what you're looking for if you're choosing to buy, right? And so they created the list of wants and they did this matrix. And let me show you the matrix. And Carolyn, if you can pop that link into the chat so people can grab that in case they want to download it. And so this is what it looks like. So this is on the left is actually the real matrix they put together. After much trial and error and a bunch of research online, put this together. This is the version that's on our tip sheet for you that you can look at. And, and then this is how he filled it out, right? They wanted to stay in Sonoma. That was their number one choice. They wanted to go from a 2-story to 1-story. They had a size requirement. They wanted the walk-in closet, and they listed, the things that they wanted. And then they did this ranking voting of what mattered most to them. And that helped them prioritize the list, right? Because the list had all of these things, but which were truly most important for them, was some things, this was their prioritized list, right? The hardwood took it just went away, right? South facing went away. Well, actually, no, they kept the south facing, sorry. But they changed what they wanted to figure out what they could find in the house. And as they said, of their wants, they got the top 4. They have 7 of the 11 they wanted. So it helped them narrow down the decisions, because when you're looking to buy, it's a totally different animal. And you're like, figuring out what will fit for you. If you know what your priorities are before you look, it helps you figure that out. And then I wanted to keep the comments he made about the in retrospect, right? As I said, he's an analytical guy, and this makes him sound a lot more rational and calm than they felt. He says, in truth, we were traumatized, and this just helped us think more clearly. It's a tool to use. And he said, had I known that each year we'd be experiencing more wildfires, evacuations, power outages, etc., their list might have been different. And so being aware of that, when you come up with the list as you're looking, your needs might change with that input. As I mentioned, the folks who moved to Utah, now they're going to move back to California because they missed it, but B, they wildfires have found them there too. I want to touch really quickly on just a couple more challenges you have. Going back to that scope of loss, your estimate of what it would be to replace the house that you've had. If your estimate's higher than your insurance company's estimate, you want that adjustment of the estimates, ask for that line by line, identify trades where there are differences. You can get specialized bids. Bear in mind that this is only going to get you up to your policy limits, right? But you want to know and enforce your rights with this. Going back again, California Fair Claims Settlement Practices Act. This is important to note. Again, this PDF will be on our website for your reference. So don't feel like you've got to scratch it out. Focus on this, like, kind, and quality, right? If you don't have to replace with like, kind, and quality, whether you're buying or rebuilding. But your argument is they owe you for what you had. And so, for example, a friend who lost her home in 2003 Cedar Fire, she had a mason chimney. It was $35,000 or something to replace it at the time of her loss. She was going to replace it with gas logs, but they owed her for that masonry chimney and fireplace. And so, that was part of her estimate of her scope of loss was, I had this is what you owe me. And that's how they, came to that agreement on what it was. Going back to what we mentioned earlier, soft costs, and these are typically paid as incurred during the building process. Some insurers are saying they're only paid if incurred, but this is part of the replacement cost of the home and they're owed whether you build or rebuild, buy or rebuild. So you want to refer them to this. Construction supervision is another area. Some insurers won't, they don't want to pay for that in the in your rebuild. If you're rebuilding, they're saying it's part of profit and overhead. It isn't. Overhead is fixed costs of running the business. Profit's what they make on the job, and then supervision is actually doing overseeing the work that's being done on the site. And if you've received an Xactimate estimate, and we've talked about that with scope of loss before, just be aware that this is not part of overhead and profit. What's included in code upgrades, this is the tips you need to be aware of this. The cost can be rolled into the purchase and upgrading of a new home, but the amount, again, is determined by the old house. Let's see, I think I've got one more. Just again, going back to the California Fair Claims Settlement Practices Act. These are just outlining, what those standards are for you. Some of these standards. So 15 days to respond, 40 days to pay or deny. This one I know trips people up because they might get a letter saying we're still evaluating, and your answer back is, what they're supposed to send you this letter that says what do they need to make a decision, how long they need to make it. And what a lot of people get back is they get this letter every 30 days that just says, your claim is still under consideration. They still owe you these two pieces of information, right? What do they need and how long do they need to make it? So again, knowing your rights and being able to assert those will help you move this along. Just a reminder, on our website, you can register for upcoming events at uphelp.org/events. Make sure you sign up for anything that's coming up. Your Q&A is on the 19th. We have these clinics going on as well. California Department of Insurance, please use them. They're a good resource for you to help you move your claims along. Reminder very quickly, this is your library, so please don't hesitate to go there. It's a wealth of information. I know sometimes it's overwhelming. At the top, there's a little search button. I find if I don't want to get overwhelmed myself and I work here, I just go and I type the keywords I'm looking for and then look at those because it's just a bite-sized piece that I'm looking for. Finally, I just want to thank our donors and funders for enabling us to be here. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen And let's see what time we're at. So we're at 6:30. Is that real? This is, right? I lost all track of time. So we've got a little bit of time left. So Carolyn, if you would just open up the chat, we'll give you the opportunity. If you've got a question for Annie or Neelam, you'll be able to use the chat for that. We'll do this for a few minutes. I want to be respectful of everyone's time, but since we've wrapped up, maybe 10 minutes before I expected to, want to give you that opportunity to ask a question in the chat. And while we're waiting on that, Annie and Neelam, any last bits of wisdom you want to share?
I would like to tell everybody, when the adjuster comes back, they come back with this huge sheaf of papers describing your house and what it takes to rebuild and how many inches of, sheetrock and wood and this and that, which didn't make any sense to me. But what did make sense to me were the interior finishes that I knew I had. So, he had asked me and written down, and then when he brought the paperwork, it said engineered wood, and I said, no, I had, solid wood floors. I had granite, I had marble, I had this, and then they would write something else, what do you call it, formica. No, it wasn't formica. It was, so I think that was a way of wearing me down, or maybe me not looking at it. But 3 times I had to go through that. And the first day when he was there, I said, we had, big beams over here in the family room. And he writes engineered beam. And I said, no, it wasn't an engineered beam. It was a solid beam and beams. And so then I had to call somebody, and he told me what that would cost. Big clear fir beam. He said, those are very difficult to get nowadays. And so things like that, which of course brought the price up. But you have to watch for all that. And then for the structural thing, use somebody who knows that to look at it, because I didn't know all that inside stuff. I just knew what I saw.
So Carol in the chat asks, we have a large piece, 25 acres, all burned, hard to know what to do. My best recommendation to you would be to remember why you bought that property, what you liked about it, the fact that, it will come back, but to make a list of the pros and cons of staying there, and put that piece of paper, tape it to a wall or to a table, and keep adding to it until it starts making sense, one side or the other, whether it's time to go or it's time to start looking into rebuilding.
And that's a key point. I know for some folks in the CZU fire in Santa Cruz with large parcels, they it was reimagining what they would do. And some people did leave, but others were, they're like, okay, I'm going to put ADUs on the property. I'm going to do my home business, opportunity. I want, I'm going to move to that next phase of my life. And so they use that to actualize where they wanted to be. So that visioning, I think, is key. And then Georgianne asked about soft costs, and Annie corrects me if I'm wrong, but so soft costs are things, when we're talking about rebuilding, we're talking about those materials, your wood, your bricks, finishes and fixtures. So soft costs are architectural permits, like we mentioned, overhead and profit. When you hire a business, that's what your builder is adding into that. Supervision is another one. It's not the labor cost to do the actual work. It's the cost the business incurs to do that.
Right. And if you go with a big builder, and I'm not promoting going with a big builder, I'm just telling you the difference, because everybody gets to do what you want in this process. is that those soft costs get absorbed by all the builds and you split those costs. So it makes it more affordable. Did you say that borrowing from retirement was or wasn't tax exempt? Did you?
I actually did not address
Yeah.
that. And the reason, it's going back to the not an attorney, nor do I play one on TV. I'm not a CPA, nor do I play one today. So we will actually, that'll be part of the conversation that we'll have in that educational unit. It's called Taxing Matters. And like I said, it'll either be in February, the beginning of March. For you guys, don't stress about your taxes now. Just be aware that those decisions you make do have the implications for taxes. And so you don't need to know the answers now, but we will have that educational workshop for you. If you're really stressing about it, and I know my husband, I always joke, and he likes to borrow trouble. So if you like to borrow trouble and like worry about things that are ahead of you, that webinar is actually from last year's for the 2020 folks is actually on our website. We did it in March of 2021. And so you can watch it, you can look at the PDF, but we will have a repeat of that with the ability for you to get those questions answered. Because the answer is complicated. That's what they tell me, the CPAs tell me every time we talk about this. Thank you, Carolyn, for putting that in the chat.
So if you're ready to make a decision, before you solidify that, make sure you check with somebody on the tax issues, somebody who knows taxes.
Yeah. And if you're feeling like you're looking at that financial decision making and you're wondering what that looks like, we do have our financial decision making clinics coming up. Those are geared for the 2020s fires because they're a little further down the road. But if you're stressing about it, that's on our events tab, and you can certainly sign up for one of those if you really want to. But a lot of times it involves having a little more information than you might have right now. And then Carol, about your trees, depends on the type of tree. I mean, it depends on what you're wanting to replace. Obviously, oaks grow back much slower. Maples grow fairly fast. It depends on what you're going for. And again, getting back into visioning what it is, if you're looking at, putting in an orchard, it's a different piece, right? It's going to look a little different. If you're looking at just the deciduous trees, looking at doing a mix so that some of those slower growing ones are going to be balanced with some of those that grow very fast. I'll tell you, my neighbor put one in less than 5 years ago, and it is 35 feet tall. And he swears to me he doesn't water it, but I know he does. And then before anything grows back, obviously you'll see this in the spring, you're going to have the mustard and the wild mustard and those things. The hills will look artificially, almost like sickly green. And then you'll see real vegetation coming back in.
And some of this, it's really interesting. In Coffee Park, where I live, we had poppies, but we never had red poppies. But they must have been blown in with the fire, because we had red poppies everywhere and they were absolutely gorgeous. So you never know what might come back, what the new additions.
Yeah, and actually that Santa Cruz had the same thing. They had California poppies just appeared everywhere, and just kind of an odd thing. Yeah, things you don't expect to see come up.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions? If not, I'll give you just a minute to see if you've got anything else. I want to thank you all for joining us today. If you've got a friend or a neighbor that was impacted by the fires and doesn't know about us, please point them out to the resources available. As Neelam said, she found out about us about 6 months after her fire, when she'd already made some decisions. And so getting people plugged into good information and the resources to help them make the decisions they've got to make is key. And if you find you've got a need for a question, we will have your Q&A on the 19th. You can submit those questions in advance. And then if anything's going on, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. I will say for all of you, you know, you've got case managers or caseworkers in your areas working. Annie and I both support all the 2021 fires in California. And so we work with those groups. So if you're stuck and you don't know what to do and you need some help, don't hesitate to reach out to them. To get a case manager. If you've got a 211 in their area, they can connect you, but don't hesitate to reach out to them. They're a resource there for you to help you in this process, connect you to other resources, and just, you know, basically plug you into what that network is providing. And if you don't know how to find a case manager in your area, if you send us an email at info@uphelp.org, Carolyn gets that. She'll check with me and Annie just to see who to connect you to, okay? But I do want to throw that out there. You're not, you know, we don't want you to be alone in this. We're rooting for you. And just, you know, let us know what we can do. All right. Thank you all. Have a good evening. And we will get you information about our taxing matters as soon as that workshop gets out the door. Thank you.
Thank you.